Hi everyone, I'm just again doing another impromptu live. I'm on a bit of a road trip today, so I'm in the car on my own for a while, and I thought I may as well just have a bit of a chat about the case while it's all fresh in my mind. I'm going to do another live later in the week, but then going to take a little bit of a break for probably most of this week because I got quite a bit of my actual day job to do. And so anyway, I thought that while I was driving, I'd have a chat about something that just keeps coming up, and I know I'm not the only one in the community to experience this. So you are going to hear the indicator in my car and traffic noises and things like that because I am driving as I'm talking. I won't be able to look at the chat much either, guys, so if anyone is chatting, sorry, I'm not ignoring you. I will have a look at it when I do stop, but I am at the moment currently on the road. So what I was going to say today, or guess what I'm going to talk about today, is the people that keep telling us we're defending a child killer. And it's a kind of a statement that's thrown at us all the time. If you are a supporter of Richard Allen, then you must be either somebody who is psychologically unwell because you believe that somebody is who's a child killer is innocent. First of all, being psychologically unwell isn't a slur, just for the record, but basically they're indicating that it's some sort of problematic behaviour that we're enacting by supporting Rick Allen. Hi, Pertinent and Carol, I did see you were in the chat. I won't be able to chat much at the moment just because I am driving, but I just stopped, so I had a quick glance over, and I'll try and do that at intervals. This is just a rant, probably not a rant because it's going to be like a logical and articulate discussion, I hope. Hey Shibby as well. I'm just talking about the fact that we get called supporters of a child killer. So I find like people who believe Rick Allen's guilty, they'll either say that or they will say you're conspiracy theorists. Now I know, I guess on that second point, that there are a lot of people around these days that do jump on the bandwagon of any case and suggest that it's a cover-up. I'm not one of those people though. I have never ever got involved in a case before and thought to myself, said to people, well, it's a conspiracy. I tend to not believe conspiracies. I'm a very scientifically minded person, and so for me, I go where the evidence goes. And that's exactly what I've done here. I initially remember when I first came across Delphi and Richard Allen, I remember thinking, why is everyone saying that this is confusing? It just seems obvious, right? Because I hadn't actually looked into the case particularly. All you see is a mugshot of a man that looks scary, because anyone looks scary in a mugshot, to be honest. And you think, okay, cool, they solved the crime. There must have been a reason that they've come upon this person. And so realistically, I actually initially went in going, I don't know why people are making such a big deal of this. It didn't almost really interest me. I wasn't even going to look into the case much. It was just that I was following the Idaho 4 case. It was, November 2022, December 2022. I was following the Idaho 4 case. I was watching Grizzly True Crime. Shout out to Gisela, she's wonderful. Her channel's amazing. And she kept referring to the Delphi case, and I'd heard of it before. I'd probably watched the odd YouTube, short summary of the case before, but I didn't know a lot about it. And I remember, once Brian Koberger was arrested and that kind of died down, I was like, okay, let's check out Delphi. For context here, this was around the period where I was going through my breast cancer. So I was post-op and then I was in chemo. So I had a lot of time on my hands to just binge watch stuff. I didn't have a lot of brain power at that point. So I felt like I didn't have the staying power to watch a show or a movie, but what I did find I could do was listen to true crime, hours and hours of coverage, and over time you get the details. I must have looked quite odd sitting in the chemo infusion chair, watching press conferences and deep dives of documents with Gisela and her crew about Koberger. Now, for the record, I don't think that Brian Koberger is wrongly convicted. So I'm not one of that camp because I know we all get kind of lumped together. so I guess where I was going, and I'm probably going to go a little bit all over the place today just because I am driving and I'm concentrating, so yeah, bear with me. But yeah, so I looked into Delphi in probably late 2022, probably more so 2023, and around the time when the Frank's memo stuff came out, the odorness stuff came out, it was when I was like, okay, well, let's just look a little bit deeper into this. But I mean, I thought it sounded absurd. I was like, what are these lawyers talking about? This sounds silly. This just sounds like an absurd, bizarre defense for someone. Again, admittedly, I had not looked into the case at that point, so I was going in blind and just assuming, like a lot of us do, that what you see in the media is correct. When you see somebody who's been arrested, then they must be guilty, right? And so that was exactly what I did in this case. I just made that assumption straight off. But I am someone who loves true crime, and so I just kept watching and learning. And again, my first point of call was Gisela, and I think one thing that's really good with Gisela is she does tend to give you know, details and documents, and doesn't give too much opinion unless it's kind of obvious. Like, she definitely has her snark towards people where it's kind of obvious that they did the crime, but she doesn't when it's a little bit on the fence. So I watched a lot of her coverage, and then I think I kind of let it go for a little bit as well, again, because, you know, life was happening. And then when the trial started in 2024, last year, I kind of deep dived into it again. And this was the first time where I really started to look at what the actual evidence was. And so it was at that point that I started to see why people were concerned about this arrest and about the potential conviction of Richard Allen. I remember still being on the fence during the trial, particularly, you know, when you hear these sort of claims of the stuff that only the killer knew and the white van, and if you haven't looked into it deeper, if you haven't, you know, and which you couldn't do back then, you actually couldn't look into it deeper because there wasn't any information available. You know, because of the gag order, there was so little information to go on. But I remember thinking that you know, he could possibly be guilty, but it certainly wasn't slam dunk. And then I remember when he was found guilty, though. So I'd listened to mostly to defense diaries and a little bit of Andrew Burkhart, and also Lawyer Lee, and a little bit of hidden true crime as well. And I'd listened to all of the coverage. I think I'd ended up sticking mostly with Bob and Ali because I felt like they were condensed enough for my attention span, but they gave enough detail and they weren't biased. I don't think that Lawyer Lee was biased at all. I think she was absolutely on the fence throughout it, and open-minded. When I say Bob and Ali, I guess, weren't biased, I mean, yes, of course, they were leaning more towards Rick Allen's defense, and I think I liked that bias. Let's be honest. I'm going to be honest here. I didn't like it when there were people who were biased towards the prosecution. They just didn't sit well with me. It wasn't so much that it was a confirmation bias, but I didn't really like the tone and the assumptions that were being made. And so, yeah, we got to the end of the trial, get to verdict, and I actually remember, like, the timing, as you guys know, is really odd here versus where a lot of you guys are. And so the trial was on, you know, like 4 a.m.-ish Australian time, and I'd sort of have terribly interrupted sleep as I tried to kind of catch some of the latest bits and pieces. And then during the day, it was spring, and I was in the garden doing my gardening, just listening to 4 hours worth of testimony, or like coverage, I suppose. And my garden looked really nice last year as a result of that, because I could just go for hours as I was listening to this all. And as some of you will know, if you've watched some of my earlier videos, that was when I started making commentary on the case, but it was still not commentary that was necessarily to do with whether I thought Rick Allen was guilty or innocent. It was more looking at the overall themes, I guess, in the case, you know, trying to understand the psychology, So I basically, did a few videos trying to sort of help people understand some of the psychological concepts that were coming up in the case. And again, I think that most people could probably tell that I wanted to lean innocent. I really did. And I've never pretended that there wasn't an element of, what would we call it? I mean, in psychology, we call it transference and countertransference. It's like you get this sort of investment in people that is based on, I guess, your own experiences. I don't know if that's probably a quick way of trying to describe it. So for example, like if I have a client that reminds me of my son, then I might notice that I'm feeling, you know, additional sort of more intense feelings of warmth towards my client. Now, I always feel warmth towards my clients, not gonna say that I don't, but yeah, you certainly can feel it when you're having more of a reaction to that client based on your own experiences. And so I've always been very honest that there was something about Rick Allen from very early on that I just energetically was like, this person, I didn't feel that he was guilty. Now, I know a lot of people would say, well, that's not very scientific and it's biased. And I think partly there is a bias because I lost my dad, as a lot of you know, when he was middle-aged. And so, and I don't know, it's something about Rick reminds me of my dad, not in appearance or anything like that, but there's something energetically. So that's that kind of idea of the more bias based on my own experiences. But then there's the other side of it, which is the clinical intuition that I have, having worked as a therapist for over 15 years now, where I am quite good at reading people. Now, obviously I'm seeing minimal snapshots of Rick Allen, but there's just little things that just kind of resonate, and sometimes you can't even put your finger on it. I mean, that's what intuition is. It's seeing patterns and picking up you know, affective cues and non-verbal cues and kind of making sense of them, and sometimes that happens at a non-verbal level. So basically I'm not going to lie, I wanted him to be innocent. Through the trial, I wasn't sure about whether he was or not, but I definitely feel like the verdict was a bit of a gut punch. I think a lot of us felt that. I did feel incredibly sad and watching Kathy come out of the courtroom. Now, at this point, if somebody's listening who doesn't fall on the Richard Allen is innocent side of the fence, they're probably going, see, you are a supporter of a child killer, you just want to believe he's innocent. And I haven't really got to the point of why I'm not a supporter of a child killer yet, but you know, those of you who are following now know me quite well, and so you probably all know that I'm not just siding with him for no good reason. There is more to it than just these feelings that I had about whether he was guilty or innocent. And those are what formed then in the ensuing months. So once we started to get the release of exhibits, particularly the interrogation and interview videos of Richard Allen, the confession tapes, and then more and more came out, I started to see the case very, very differently. Well, not very, very differently. I started to see that there was actually method behind my intuition, because the more that I saw, the more that I believed he was innocent. And eventually I came to a point where I was pretty much 100% sure that he was innocent. I remember I would really flip-flop a lot in those early days. I'd find something that was like, yeah, slam dunk, he's innocent. And then I'd get a little like kind of doubt creep in, and I'd be like, oh, but maybe he's not. And as most people know, again, if you know me well, ChatGPT is my best friend. So I chat things out with ChatGPT for hours, being like, you know, what do you think? I know ChatGPT is not a person, but he's a great mirror. I really do enjoy speaking to ChatGPT, which is actually apparently a very common thing for neurodivergent people. So I don't feel silly in saying that. I know a lot of my clients also do this. So I don't just use ChatGPT for searching and looking up information. I also use ChatGPT to be a bit of a mirror. ChatGPT is like, you know, having a best friend that is just so clever and gets everything, and it also picks up your nuances, so it knows you and it kind of talks back to you. So it's just like talking to yourself, only the version of you that has even more infinite knowledge. So it's pretty cool. I do correct it sometimes, though, not gonna lie. I tone police ChatGPT occasionally. I think that it needs sometimes a little bit more of the emotional intelligence, but anyway, that's beside the point. I hope you guys enjoy me just talking, because I'm driving and I'm just talking, and I can't see what you guys are saying, but I know you guys are my friends, so you do like to listen to me rambling. But this is more just a chat today, guys. It's not me presenting any major insights. I do feel proud of some of the presentations that I've done recently that are more informative and more structured. But today is just you guys keeping me company while I drive to the mountains for my little mumcation, as I'm calling it. So this is really more a live stream for friends more than for general people looking at the case. So yeah, just to explain what I'm doing today, because you guys are my friends and you probably don't just want to hear me talk about Rick Allen all the time. So as you all know, I'm a psychologist. I say that a zillion times, that it's a massive part of my identity. But it's a job that I absolutely love the therapy side of and the learning side of, but I absolutely hate the administrative side of. And so I always have to do letters and reports, and there's billings and things like that. Most of the really annoying marketing and billing stuff is done by my clinic, but there are bits and pieces that I still have to do, and I avoid them at all costs. I really hate doing it, so I let it all back up. And I've also said before, I do actually have ADHD. I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm so ADHD. I do actually have ADHD. I have ADHD and OCD, and that combination is both magical when it comes to me deep diving into this case, but also really problematic when it comes to doing things that I don't want to do. And so, yeah, I basically have always got a pile of stuff that I haven't done. I've got a bag full of things I have to scan or file. I've got, yeah, letters pending, a massive to-do list. So I decided to book myself an Airbnb in the mountains for 3 nights, much to the dismay of my kids, because they were really sad that mummy's going to be away for a few nights. They're fine. They're totally fine. So I live with my mum. We co-parent my kids. And so they are basically with their other mum. So they're fine, but they just don't want mummy to go. But I'm going to go to the mountains. I'm going to go for some nice hikes. I'll probably do some of my field studies with benches and trees and paths, but also get a little bit of R&R, but also I have my laptop and the pile of paperwork, and I've really got to work hard on it, because this is a nice solid 3 days to get it all done, because otherwise it hangs over me and I feel guilty all the time, and it's not a nice feeling, as anyone who procrastinates knows. Anyway, back to Rick Allen. So basically, because of actually the way that my brain works, and I talk about the way that my brain works a lot because I do believe my neurodivergence does play a part in my advocacy for Rick Allen for multiple reasons. Because my brain is the type of brain that needs to really digest things to the nth, level, to the nth degree. I was trying to think of the word there. And so, for me, it's not good enough to just say he's probably guilty or he's probably innocent. I was like, I need to figure this out. So anyone who has OCD, and I know there's a few people who follow me who've been in my chat before, and we talk about OCD. OCD, one of the core kind of cognitive errors or biases or distortions is this intolerance of uncertainty. I hate not knowing. I do not follow unsolved mysteries. I can't deal with them. They really pee me off. So basically instead I just keep trying to figure it out, and obviously without discovery and without access to everybody in the case, that's really hard to do. But what I've done with the Delphi case is I have trawled through every single thing that I can find on each different issue, and then tried to digest it myself, run things through ChatGPT, because gosh, reading pages of testimony is not my thing. So I do get ChatGPT to help a little bit with that and organize some of my thoughts. But yeah, and I mean, all credit to the amazing resources out there that have allowed me to have the information to do that. So I will always give credit where credit's due, even though some of the people who collate some of the information don't necessarily see eye to eye with me. I'm really wanting to highlight and show appreciation for the efforts that they make. And so there's a lot of people on Reddit where there's huge amounts of super helpful information. And of course, my go-to place is All Eyes website, because, you know, she's done just an amazing job of collating all of the relevant stuff and having it in one place. And for somebody like me who likes things to happen quickly, that's the ADHD part of me, I really need that. And so, yeah, shout out to All Eyes. I know that I'm not in that group that, you know, that she is friendly with, but I do really think that her resources are amazing. Like, because if I didn't have that information all at my fingertips, then I wouldn't be able to do the kind of deep dives that I've been doing over the last few months. I actually have lost my train of thought, but as it will come back to me. I think I was just talking about, but how I came to the conclusion that Rick is innocent. And I say that with so much conviction. I mean, I don't think anyone can ever say, well, 100% I know for sure, because we weren't there. I don't know Rick personally, obviously. But I you know, I'm as sure as I possibly can be that he is not the offender of this crime. And the reason for that, as anyone who's watched my videos before knows, is certain parts of the evidence. But yeah, going back to how my brain kind of works. So I've got this intolerance of uncertainty. I've got this, I talk a lot about systems thinking, and basically it's a way of thinking where you're really kind of pulling threads together. You're seeing layers. It's very much related to sort of the idea of pattern recognition, which again is quite a, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I'm not great at multitasking, to be honest, because this is like, I'm driving and I'm driving on an unfamiliar route, so I think that's probably part of it too. But yeah, so pattern recognition is often linked to neurodivergence. So again, not all different types of neurodivergence, but yeah, I guess some of the kind of qualities that I have in terms of how my brain is wired. And so I very much find things related to each other and kind of create a web of ideas. And I think that that's absolutely needed in a case like this. I think it's needed in any sort of investigation, really. So yeah, I think that that's where I've been able to sometimes use the way that my brain is wired to help in this case. And it means I'm relentless. I just don't give up. Like, there's been a few times I've wanted to throw in the towel on this case, just because it's quite stressful dealing with, I guess, the trolls aspect of the case. That's the thing that really has got me down, and as I know, it has a lot of people in this genre, in true crime in general, but particularly the Delphi case. It's a particularly divisive case, but yeah, but I just can't give up. I can't put it down, and I think a lot of people say that about Delphi. It's a little bit of an addiction. So yeah, so I didn't give up. And, you know, in fact, in some ways, I've said this before, but the trolling actually made me more determined, because I think I was like, okay, nobody's hearing me, and they keep thinking I'm wrong. What's a better way of explaining it? Like, what more information can I find? And it kind of forced me to just keep challenging myself to find more and more and more info. And in doing so, I've really refined my arguments for Rick's innocence over the past few months. So if you read some of my earlier posts on Reddit, or, you know, you even listen to some of my earlier videos, you'll see that there are things that I said earlier that I stand by in gist, but there were some details and things that I've certainly evolved over the time. And that's not, to me, again, I don't think that's a problem. I think that's how we as human beings evolve our ideas. And I mean, that's how technology works. I mean, we didn't all start off with a smartphone, did we? We started off with a big brick phone. I was doing an assignment with my son the other day about technology of the past. So we were going over all of the different phones that I've had in my lifetime. And I guess, side note there, but it relates to what I'm talking about. You know, ideas evolve over time. And so my problem, going back to people who straight away comment on anything, not just that I do, that anyone who says Rick's innocent post, they kind of straight away say, well, no, he changed his timeline, and no, you know, he looks like Bridge Guy, or no, you know, so and so saw this or whatever. Like, it's just you just then say, like, why are you not willing to engage with the content and looking deeper? Like, totally fine if you're not. Like, I don't engage with the content and look deeper on every case either. I'm not suggesting everybody should be looking at this case. I mean, I'd love it if they did. But if you're going to engage with my content or anyone's content in this and disagree, no issue with that whatsoever. But why can't you actually listen to what the person's saying? So, like, for example, I do disagree with Tom Webster and Gray Hughes. However, I've listened to their content. I've been able to respect that they organise their content and can sometimes have some quite compelling information, and they're entitled to their view. But I disagree with it after knowing the details that they're actually showing. It's not that I'm blinded to it and saying, well, I'm just not even going to consider that, and no, he is definitely innocent. But I do feel like there's a whole group of people who believe he's guilty, and this is not everybody who believes he's guilty. This is the people who particularly, I guess, are referred to as the guilters, or the trolls who do actually come out and say you're simping for a child killer, you know, you love Rick Allen, you want to, you know, would you leave your kids with Rick Allen? You know, they say those very provocative statements, and it's like, you haven't engaged with the content. Because if you listen to my videos and you still believe he's guilty, that's totally fine, because like I said, I can't probably prove 100% that he's innocent. I don't think that anyone can do that, but I do believe I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you know, he's most likely innocent. But I think at the end of the day, you know, I'm happy for you to end the videos and go, no, what she said isn't very compelling, I don't agree with what she's saying. But, like, don't bring up the points in your comments that are the points that I've actually explained using memory science and forensic psychology and fact and logic. Yeah, I get passionate about that because it just annoys me, because I really do engage with people's ideas. I know that I am very strong-minded about my ideas, but the reason I am, and I know this might sound like I'm justifying myself, but the reason I am is because I've spent hour upon hour looking at this, and not just looking at it from my own, just, well, my perspective is, but thinking about multiple perspectives, looking at research, you know, integrating all of that information. And I know there are other people that do that too, so I'm not suggesting I'm the only one who's done it, but the people who tend to go straight out and say, no, you're wrong, in a more sort of disrespectful way, tend to be the people that haven't done that. Also, guys, just I'm mindful because I'm not able to really watch the chat today. I don't know if any of the other creators are going to do any lives today. So if you guys do all disappear, totally fine. I may not see you disappear. I can see when I've stopped driving, I glanced a couple of times and had a look. But if you guys do go, like, I don't know if Rick Snay may be doing a live today, or I don't know if Prof is either as well. Like, if anyone else is doing a live, of course, I know I don't want to hold you up here, like, while I'm just having my little ramblings on my road trip. You can always come back and listen to the replay if you want to. It's really just a conversation with Amy today. It's not any big sort of nuggets of wisdom, and I can't interact much with you guys today anyway as well, unfortunately, but I will read the chat when I stop for my little lunch break in a while. I didn't have breakfast this morning. It's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to stop for an early lunch. I think I'm going to get some Lebanese food. I don't know, but my tummy's feeling a bit meh at the moment, so who knows. I'm going to try not to go to McDonald's because I am a junk food addict. I'm constantly looking for sugar and junk. So anyway, side note, you guys are getting to know me really well today. You're hearing bits and pieces about me that don't relate to Rick Allen. Yeah, going back to my point though, the whole idea of disagreeing. Can we not disagree in a way, first of all, that's respectful? Second of all, that actually considers what someone's saying. So for example, I don't go on posts about politics that I'm not aware of and say that sucks or I don't like that. I mean, I'm not going to lie that I do. There are certain political figures, and I won't name any of them. I think most people could probably read between the lines, but there are certain political figures that I kind of have this overall gist of who they are, and I don't like them. But that said, I don't know their policies, and so I won't comment on specifics unless I've actually read the details. And I know that, I mean, this is a problem, I think, in our society, because I mean, even like my mum's a really smart person. I get on really well with my mum. I love her to bits, but she will listen to something on a podcast or in the news, and then she'll kind of quote it like it's like, and she'll be like, so, oh no, that ChatGPT told people to, you know, end their lives. And I was like, really? I mean, I don't know. I've heard that in a headline recently. I'm going to look into it. That's an interesting story, actually. I should look into that. But I found it really hard to believe based on my experience with it. But I was like, I don't want to jump to conclusions without looking a bit deeper. I'm not going to go straight into saying true, false about anything. Which again, so if we go to the second group of people who tend to be kind of trolly in their behaviour, it's the people who do believe Rick's innocent, but then don't like it that other people haven't agreed 100% with them. And so here I am saying, you can disagree with me, but just actually engage with my content and be respectful. But this other group is like, you must agree with us, and you must agree with things the way that we say it. Otherwise, we don't care about what you have to say. And so with them, I found that the issue has been that they don't like it, and they bring up over and over again, well, you know, you thought he was guilty, you know, a few months ago, or you were flip-flopping, or and I've seen it not just, again, it's not just targeted at me. I've seen other people be targeted for saying things like, look, I can't say that Rick's 100% factually innocent, and then that's being used as a sign that they're what do they call it? Not bad character. I can't think of the words. I've learned so many of these words that people use in sort of online communities, but yeah, but basically they're engaging in bad faith or whatever, and it becomes this like really, like, again, a nastiness about that. I mean, look, I do say I'm nearly 100% sure that Rick Allen is guilty. I've said 100%. Of course, like I said, there's always got to be that teeny slither of doubt in anything, because no one knows 100% what was happening because you weren't there. But I have no issue if you don't think you probably think he's not guilty, but you're not 100%, that's okay. Like, if you're still forming your opinion, that is how we form opinions. And that's a really healthy way to form opinions, is to gradually take in information and not be biased from day one. So, yeah, I mean, so there's that group as well that, you know, just, it's almost like you must have this allegiance to us. Like, it's quite dictatorship, maybe not dictatorship or whatever, but, you know, I don't know the word because I don't know a lot about politics, but it feels very, like, yeah, it's like you go with us, you go with the group, and it's like, well, no, you don't have to. Like, I mean, I engage with people who come from both sides of the fence and all along the continuum when it comes to this case. And I mean, there's plenty of people in the sub that I moderate that believe Rick's guilty. In fact, I believe it's a little over 50% of the sub, which is really interesting, right? Because I started the sub and I'm yelling from the rooftops that I think Rick is an innocent man, and I'm constantly advocating for him. But I don't have an issue with that. And then there are even people who you know, I don't necessarily agree with their points when they're saying that he's guilty, but if they're engaging in good faith, if they're not being too disrespectful, I do let sometimes, because I don't want to tone police completely and censor people, but I let a little bit of disrespect slide through and just kind of say, guys, can we just be a bit kinder? We don't need to call people sick or, you know, deluded or use those sorts of terms. But I don't mind. If you think Rick Allen's guilty, you're allowed to think that. But please try and listen to what I'm saying and then make your judgments too. So, I mean, the one that I've come across so much recently has been but he changed his timeline. I mean, like, this is memory science 101, and I don't expect everybody to know that, because realistically, most people have not studied memory science, and that makes sense. But, like, I'm telling you, there is research. There are research studies. But even if you think of it yourself, like, and I think this is what I think a lot of us are missing, and I mean, I'm guilty of this too sometimes. It's like that perspective taking. Like, really try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, because most of us cannot remember what time we arrived and left at a place anyway. But what memory research shows, is anyone who's watched my recent videos on the timeline, and interestingly, the memory research one was the one with the least views, which is a shame, because it's like, this is the stuff that tells you why, you know, a lot of the witness testimonies are not suspicious, because so many people are going, oh, well, can you believe this person? Would you believe that person? Maybe they're lying, maybe. And it's like, no, maybe it's just memory, because memory is really fallible. So one of the things we know with memory is memory for like the time frames is particularly poor. We're good at remembering the gist of things, but we're not very good at remembering the timings. And we tend to sort of anchor to things. So I'll be like, well, I left after school drop off, or I left around lunchtime. And you see that Rick does that. But the problem as well is there's something called the telescoping effect. And this is something I would have learned at uni years ago. So I'm not talking off the top of my head here. I did do a little bit more research again, looking into this. But it kind of, to me, rang true with what I was thinking. Which is that, you know, I can't remember the time that I did something 5 years ago unless I've rehearsed that over and over again. It was at this time, at this time. Like, I hate to say this, but I don't know the time that my kids were born, right? And I don't remember it. Like, I remember vaguely, I remember going into hospital, and I remember, like, you know, vaguely that it was probably in the, well, not probably, I do know it was in the evening, but I couldn't tell you if they were born at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. Both my boys were born in the evening. That doesn't help either. But yeah, I can't remember the exact time frames. We're anchoring it to things. I'm thinking, well, I remember my obstetrician with my first son. He went, and because I was kind of in early labor still, and things were just kind of progressing slowly. Yeah, you're really learning lots about me today. And he said, I'm going to come back after dinner. So I remember it was after dinner, and then I do remember as soon as I gave birth, I had gestational diabetes, so I had not been able to have Coke or McDonald's, and I am, like I said, a big junk food addict. So I had my husband go straight out to get me that, and I remember eating my Maccas and enjoying it thoroughly in the evening for dinner that day. So, you know, again, I can kind of anchor to some of those points, but it's not exact. So with Rick Allen changing his time, that is not a big issue. That's not something that we're like, oh, so suspicious. It's not suspicious. And I think that goes for both sides. Again, it's not suspicious in that he's changed his time to not be guilty, but it's also not proof that he was there earlier either. So yeah, that's one of the common things that keeps coming up. But he said, and but they said, but they didn't see it. It's like, yes, but the memory research is not inconsistent with that. There is nothing inconsistent about the fact that his time has changed over the years, or that the witnesses' timings and memories of things have changed over the years. We know there's also memory contamination, right? So here we're talking about, you know, all of the witnesses that day, they've heard stories about this. It's a small town. They've heard them, you know, it would have been the talk of the town, of course, but also all of the news, media coverage. A lot of people would have engaged with social media, so they're going to be hearing things about different aspects of the case. You're going again get contamination here. I mean, a lot of people will say, but what about the white van? Well, guess what? Rick Allen didn't say white van anyway, if we're to believe this whole confession thing with Dr. Waller. He said van. But now Chinese Whispers has made it white van because that fits with Brad Weber, right? It's like, oh, well, Brad Weber had a white van. Well, yeah, he did. And yes, we're trying to marry that up. However, let's all remember that the timing is completely off. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, that aside, the point I'm making is Rick Allen never said white van. Or, you know, another thing that's been perpetuated before is, you know, he told them the clothes that he was wearing back in 2017. No, he didn't. He doesn't remember in his interview. He said, I might have, but as far as we're aware of what Doolan's report said, he didn't say that. So, you know, it's just this Chinese whispers, and that happens all the time with our memory. You can see I'm really passionate about this stuff. It's like, guys, like, let's just, like, try and engage with different perspectives. Let's try and engage as well with what research and science shows us. And research, I'm not saying is 100%. I'm not saying there's not even a tiny possibility that he's lying. I memean, there is, of course. There's a tiny possibility that I'm lying right now. I mean, nobody knows if somebody's telling the truth. But, you know, we need to engage with a little bit more evidence-based stuff rather than just throwing things out there. The other point that comes up consistently as something is Rick Allen is not that unusual. Look at BTK, and again, I've argued this point to the nth degree. I'm sure it will come up in the psych video that I'm doing this week with my colleagues. BTK and Rick Allen are not comparable. Rick Allen is a middle-aged man with a long-term relationship. Yes, BTK had that and kids. Yes. However, the difference is BTK started his crimes in his 20s, which is so consistent with what we see of serial killers. Majority of serial killers start before the age of 30. There are, there's probably these tiny rare cases where it doesn't, but the vast majority do. When we see people whose first offence is around middle age, generally speaking, we're looking at offences that are more, I was going to say crimes of passion, but people will still say, well, this is a crime of passion. But they tend to be crimes with people that we have some relationship with, or there's some sort of connection to. So, for example, a husband killing a wife, or, or even, I do believe, like, there's a serial killer here in Australia called the Granny Killer, and I believe he was older. But again, the type of crime, there was an explanation psychologically for it. Like, he killed, I believe, a whole lot of older women, and I think again it was mum issues or something like that. But there is, I have not found other cases like Rick Allen. I think one person on X brought up a case that was a middle-aged man who I believe essayed and maybe unalived some people at middle age and didn't have any history. I think I saw one case like that, but even with that case, the nature of the crime was different. Like, it was a very frenzied, disorganized attack. He got caught very quickly. So quite different again to Rick Allen, where we're expecting that he's never done this before, but then at 44 he decides, yep, I'm going to do it, and then he does it in such an organized way that he remains undetected for years. He's left no DNA, no clues, and on top of that, he's capable of living a normal life for 5 years in the community and nobody has a clue. So, it's things like that where you're like, it's not backed up. I mean, I've had people say to me, well, I saw on the Crime Investigation Network, that some people were found guilty from DNA and they had gone for years. And it's like, yeah, but again, let's look at the context, let's look at the nuance. So I get quite emotive, I suppose, about this, because emphatic, I suppose, about this, because it's just like, I wouldn't go and say to an astrophysicist, I know better than you do because I watched a documentary. And I'm not saying I know better about forensic psychology than everybody, because that's not, it's not my expertise. My expertise is clinical psychology. But I have looked at the research. And if you look at the research, then, yeah, argue away. But if we're just going to go based on, well, I wouldn't do that, or I don't think that, or, what I saw on the Crime Investigation Network said that, then that kind of gets to me a little bit, I definitely have to say. Even that point of, like, I wouldn't do that, like, that to me also is interesting, because I'm like, really? How do you know that? How many of us have ended up in situations we thought we would never be in and acted in ways that we never thought we would act? Like, again, this is cognitive empathy, this is perspective taking, this is the capacity to kind of imagine how it is for somebody else. And I've said many, many times that if I were in Rick Allen's position, I possibly would have confessed as well, because I think it would be maddening to be locked up for a crime that you didn't do out of left field, and be, having people yelling, you're a baby killer, and goodness knows what else is being yelled at him, and being, really in conditions that would bring upon major sort of psychiatric problems for most of us, being in those confined spaces and having the lights on, being videoed all the time. And then if you put that together with somebody who already has a more vulnerable kind of internalizing temperament, which we know he has based on his history of mental health concerns and anxiety and depression, then yeah, I could see how that was you know, that was something that it is not out of left field at all that he particularly confessed that many times. Which brings me to another point. When people say, but he confessed 61 times or whatever, and it's like, you know, the very fact that you're telling me it's 61 times straight away tells me, that's suspicious. Not suspicious of guilt, suspicious of mental illness, right? You know, the average offender, if they're actually going to confess because they committed the crime, is not going to do it 61 times, and certainly obviously not in the way that Rick does it. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into that because that's going to come up in the psych stuff that we're going to do later this week, and also does come up in some of my past videos. I'm going to do my little stop soon, and I'm probably heard enough of my own voice for a little while, but I guess, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really wanted to sort of bring up that people say. I mean, people always say about the bullet, and again, it's like, yeah, but have you read the science? Because, you know, comparing a spent round to an unspent round is like not good science. It's not validated. You know, if you want to go and look at tool mark analysis on Google Scholar even, and read some of the articles, even if you read the abstracts, you'll see that's not routine practice at all. Nor is it sensible in a case like this to only have one person do the visual inspection and comparison and not have anybody else corroborate that data. So, you know, there's just so many aspects to this case. Oh, yes, that's right. The other one is, well, Rick's phone didn't ping there that day, so he must be guilty because he turned his phone off. And it's like, no, because if that was true, if that is actually true, then why did the state not raise that? Because that would have been wonderful evidence of consciousness of guilt and premeditation. And, you know, if you watch the stuff that I've talked about when it comes to geofencing, tower dumps, phone stuff, well, you'll see that I think it's quite likely that his phone did ping on the trails that day, just it wasn't convenient to mention or make clear to the defense, because they could sidestep it by giving the defense, you know, reams of data, or terabytes probably rather than reams, terabytes of data that's so hard to kind of dig through and kind of figure out, you know, what it's showing. You know, are there some backdoor geofencing reports from 2017 that have never seen the light of day when it comes to discovery? Anyway, side note again. But again, I mean, people just will say these things with such conviction, and you're like, it's like me saying the sky is blue. Yeah, the sky is blue some of the time. It's not today. The sky's grey where I am today. You know, the sky's probably black in some places where you guys are because it's nighttime. But, you know, when the person's like, no, I know it's blue. And it's like, well, sometimes it is, but, like, what are some other colours that the sky can be too? And let's at least consider those. Yeah, it's a closed-minded kind of way of looking at this, the rigidity, the inflexibility. You know, that's the stuff that I think gets my goat. And it's no problem with being rigid and closed-minded to things, but then don't argue as though you know. Like I said, I'm closed-minded about politics and physics. They're not interest areas of mine. I'm not closed-minded, but I'm just not interested, so I don't learn about it and I don't know about it. And as such, I'm not going to I'm not going to go on social media and say, well, I know what's right. So as I said before, it was not that I'm sort of gatekeeping and saying, well, I'm a psychologist, so I know better. It's actually more just saying, like, I'm an informed person in this area, so I know better. Along with a lot of you guys, because you guys keep up with all of this stuff. You listen to, hours and hours of Delphi content. So to me, I'm like, well, you can speak up. And, you know, I always welcome the comments from you guys and love engaging with you guys, even, you know, if you disagree or, we're coming to different conclusions. I have no problem with that. It's the fact of people not being well informed and yet speaking like they are experts and already know. And that's a psychological phenomenon. I always like to thread back in psychology. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you're ever interested in social psychology, it's a finding where, again, people who know less often seem more confident, and people who know more often doubt themselves a lot more, because the more you know, the more you know that you don't know, right? I think that's probably it, because I don't actually know who's in the chat now because I'm on a highway and I can't check. I also can't turn it off, so I'll just keep talking, but if no one's there, totally fine to just talk to myself, because I'm going to have solitude for the next few days. So I guess this is my talking point. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to raise. I'm sure there's plenty more things that I could raise. But yeah, I think it's just frustrating. I think it's frustrating. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say. So some people will say, well, I do listen to hours of Delphi content, but if you only listen to the same content over and over again, you know, we're looking at the sort of echo chamber communities, well then again, that's not broadening your perspective. So I've always said that I listened to Gisela, obviously, to begin with. I listened to Defense Diaries, I listened to Andrew Burkhart, I listened to Lawyer Lee, I listened to Hidden True Crime, I've listened to Gray Hughes, I've listened to Tom Webster, I've looked at some of the other channels here and there. I still like to pop in and look at Cryptex's channel. Everyone knows that I do definitely listen to Prof's channel. I listen to Rick Snay, I listen to All Eyes, and I've listened to Case by Case, I've listened to R&M, I've listened to the Mean Girls, even though they don't like me. I've listened to what they have to say, and you know, I actually want to get information from all the sources, because I think that's the way that we can have the broadest perspective, and then we can come to conclusions that, you know, account for and integrate all of the information, rather than it be an echo chamber. And so, yeah, even on my own channel, I don't need this to be my followers, like in the sense of like, you all agree with me at all costs. That's not what I need you to do. I mean, I have quite strong conviction with some of my ideas, and you know, I feel like I've tested out hypotheses, and I hope that people agree. But it's, you know, I'm also always willing to say, as I think anyone who listens to me knows, I'm always willing to say, like, I might be wrong, I don't know, I'm tentative here. You know, is this reasonable? What do you think? You know, I did a poll last night. You know, do you agree with my timeline, or do you think it's the earlier timeline, or do you think he's guilty? You know, it's like, I think that's the whole kind of intellectual curiosity that we can have. You know, I want to know what other people think and why they think it. You know, I've certainly been corrected many times by the lawyers in this community, because I don't know the law. I love to try and speculate on legal angles, because I try to kind of think of, so in psychology research, you know, we often like to have, the last section is like the implications, and so I sometimes pull things out and go, well, this is probably what's happening here, and people will be like, yeah, that's cool, but what are you going to do with that? And so I do try to draw on the angles, maybe wishful thinking sometimes, trying to find things that could be brought up at appeal. You know, admittedly, it was only through the last few months that I've even understood what an appeal is, actually, because I always thought an appeal just means you're saying, well, the conviction's unfair, it's wrong, and here's some more evidence. But now I've realized that's post-conviction relief, but I didn't know that. But again, I'm happy for somebody to tell me, no, you're wrong, Amrit. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I will sometimes I'll stick up for my perspective if I think that, you know, maybe that person's dismissing me a little bit too quickly, and that certainly has happened. I do feel like sometimes people dismiss me, so I will argue the point, but it's not coming from a place of saying, I know better. It's just saying, have you also considered this, because I feel like you're just dismissing me without listening to what I say. And again, if anyone ever feels like that with me, I'd want them to say that. I'd want them to say, actually, you're dismissing, which is exactly why I don't censor comments at all. Like I said, I've even let comments slide that can be quite harsh and unkind in the tone, but I'm like, but they're making arguments that deserve consideration. They're not just saying, no, he's guilty, you're wrong. They're saying, but you said this, and then you said this, and that's a contradiction. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'm happy to engage with you about that contradiction, but I'm not happy necessarily with the tone in which you do it. I am very careful with my own tone, because words hurt other people, and even the people who hurt me, you know, sometimes I kind of, you know, we all have that vengeful streak of like, oh, I really want to get back at them. But deep down, if I really kind of think about it, I don't want to ruin anyone's day. I really don't. You know, like, I'm not a saint. I definitely have vengeful parts of me, but if you engage with me in good faith, particularly, I will never want to create any harm towards you in any way. Sometimes when you bully me, will I want to kind of get a little bit of justice? Yes, I will, but even then, I don't want to do it at the cost of somebody's mental health. You know, I just don't think that that's ever worth it. Anyway, yeah, I think I'm just talking now because I can't actually turn off the recording, and otherwise it'll just be me silently driving. Because I think I've talked enough. That's been quite a bit of just ranting and thoughts, and I wish I could ask you guys what you think and speak to that, but I can't because I'm driving and I cannot look at my phone. I won't do that. That's very naughty. So I'm trying to think of something else to sort of fill in the next few minutes until I can find somewhere to pull off and switch off my recording. Yeah, I mean, I guess just talking a little bit more about the upcoming video this week, which I'm super excited about. We're recording it tonight because we're doing it remotely with each other. Two of my colleagues, but we all work together and have done for a while. One of my colleagues is particularly one of my closest friends as well, and probably the cleverest person I know, and I don't say that lightly, just a very, very wise person. And yeah, so I'm really excited to have her come on and have a chat. We actually have started recording a podcast together, which we haven't published because we're both perfectionists and procrastinators, but we are doing a podcast that's about therapy stuff as well. So anyway, yeah, so what we're gonna do is I'm going to, first of all, going to just hear a tiny bit of background about them to sort of see who they are, what their expertise is, and what they know of the case, which is pretty minimal, just what I've said to them in lunchrooms and in passing. And then we're going to look at the interrogation videos and the testimony of Dr. Westcott and Dr. Wala in terms of Rick's history. Then we're going to ask them, the conceptualization of, what would be some of the sort of diagnostic considerations of Rick Allen if we look at sort of his pre-incarceration functioning and personality, and mental health concerns. And then we're going to look at what happened in jail during the incarceration and the decompensation and the conditions, and we're going to get them to comment then on whether they, what they believe was going on there in terms of psychiatric considerations, and then also see if we can get them to comment on whether they would trust the confessions, whether they feel that this is a person that sort of meets the bill as far as they're concerned as someone who could have committed the crime. Now, obviously, everybody knows what I think. I've told them not to be biased by what I think. They can absolutely disagree with me. I will reiterate that to them today before we get started, because I really want them to speak based on what they actually think, not be biased, because Amy says this and she's our friend and colleague and we're going to support her. Look, by and large, the three of us would probably be on the same page in terms of how we interpret things. We do, as psychologists, we do supervision, group supervision, where we sit and discuss cases, like case conference. So we do tend to be on the same page. We're friends and colleagues, so we've kind of gravitated to each other as well. We work in a fairly large clinic now, and whilst I love all of my colleagues, shout out to my whole team, they're wonderful. These are some of the people that I would call kind of my closest friends within the clinic. So of course, like attracts like, and we're going to be more inclined to probably have fairly similar perspectives, but still, I think one thing that they don't have is all of the background of the case and the bias that comes with that, because I'm very, very invested now in Rick Allen and his innocence. I think it becomes more than just this is what the evidence says, and it becomes almost personal. And I think I speak for probably a lot of us when I say that. I think a lot of us have this. And it's not parasocial, like in, I don't think it's an unhealthy thing, but, the more you spend time getting to know somebody's story and hearing about them, the more that you do sort of have more of a bias perhaps towards them. So, yeah. I've got to actually just give them the snapshot of the case, and that's always tricky too. Like, how do I condense it all down just to give them the basics? That's going to be hard. Another video I'm thinking of doing as well, and like I said, I'm just filling time here, guys, so fine if everybody's dropped off or if you guys are just chatting amongst yourselves. Another video I was thinking of doing was actually a video about Abby and Libby, because I don't like the fact that I don't talk about them a lot, because you know, obviously a lot of my focus is on the case against Rick Allen, and that's the area where I feel like I can, you know, have some have a bit of a voice and maybe do some advocacy. But of course Abby and Libby are so central to this case, and you know, if I believed Rick Allen was guilty, there's no way that I would be doing videos all about Rick Allen. I'd be, you know, if I were going to do any videos, I'd be doing it all about Abby and Libby. But in this case, because, you know, if you believe Rick Allen's innocent, as I do, then you see that he's a victim too, along with Kathy and his family. But, you know, Abby and Libby, you know, ultimately, you know, these beautiful young lives lost, you know, in such a horrific way, and an unimaginably terrifying, horrific experience for those girls, you know, and something that no one deserves, let alone two innocent young girls. And so I do think I want to do a video on them, not so much, you know, talking so much about them and the crime, but more talking about, I guess, like, maybe understanding, or maybe kind of trying to understand what might have happened that day from their perspective. Because one of the things that comes up a lot is, you know, did they fall for some, you know, catfish Anthony shots type thing, and I don't tend to believe that. And I know that there is, you know, there are people that say that they were meant to meet Kegan Kline, Anthony shots, but I don't know, like, there's reasons for it. I won't get into them now because it's a whole other long topic to talk about, but I guess I want to, like, and this will just be pure speculation, because again, I don't know enough about Abby and Libby to make a determination of what their motives were of going to the trails that day, or what's going on in their lives. But I think that there's room for another you know, other narratives about what might have been happening that day, and that will help maybe, I'm trying to think of it, like no matter what happened, they, you know, they deserve the utmost of respect and compassion, of course, but I don't really like it when they're painted as like girls that kind of got catfished. And it's not because if you got catfished you're silly, I'm not suggesting that, but I just don't think, I just feel like there's an astuteness, particularly about Libby, and again, this is an energetic thing, so you know, I may be off base with this, but I just get this energy about Libby that she's protective and she's clever and she's strong, and Abby too. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think that she's not. I think she's just a quieter presence. I think, you know, both of the girls seem wise and clever and, you know, loyal. You know, there's definitely a lot of strength in both of them, but there's something about that last photo, the one in the car, that just makes me think there's something else. Anyway, I haven't done a video on my theory of the offenders and the motive. I'm really hesitant to do it. I don't really like the idea of naming people who are not arrested or haven't been convicted. I'm a little bit worried, I suppose, about doing that. I know others do it, and I think most people who've read my posts will see I have definitely name dropped or dropped initials at least of people who I believe are involved, but I'm cautious of that, and also because I'm not sure. I definitely don't have as strong a conviction around the actual events of what did happen as I do that Rick isn't part of that. I'd say I'm fairly kind of not convinced, but yeah, I definitely lean quite heavily in favor of a particular group, and I guess that already gives you some clues of who I think are involved. But yeah, anyway, hard to know. Okay, guys, I am about to pull over, so I am going to stop recording now, and I'm going to go back and read the chat when I have my lunch. I'm getting hungry now already. It's 10:30, but I'm going to have an early lunch. So thank you so much, all of my beautiful people who always come and show up here, and you know who you are. I could name you out again for the bazillionth time, and I will continue to name you because you are so special, but I won't now because I'm on the road still and I'm just about to pull over and I've rambled enough for one day. So have a wonderful, I was going to say have a wonderful day, have a wonderful night, because you guys are probably all ready for sleep, except Diana, because she stays up till like the crack of dawn. Silly girl. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.